I'm not sure if you're seeing this, but for some reason, these lamps look very Ura-y. Like there's definitely a kind of roundish blob surrounding each lamp, and I'm not sure if it's just my glasses or the atmospheric composition in this particular part of where I am, but it's definitely happening. I'm not sure if you can see it. We're on to the topic of the day. So while I was walking to lunch this afternoon, I was pretty sure I heard my name whispered by my ear, even though no one was there. Now, I'm not entirely sure if I was just, attaching a pattern to birdsong, or maybe the wind just did something very extraordinary there and I just didn't catch it. But for all of 5 minutes, or at least until I got back to my dorm, I felt like my life was extraordinary, because something very out of the ordinary had happened to me. So extraordinary, in fact, that I could almost laughably believe in magic. Now, I felt amazing, and really it was an amazing occurrence, but it's not really definitive or meaningful. It just kind of happened, and I can laugh at it. But it got me to thinking why I was so attached to magic, or the idea of it, even though hearing voices, even in the wizarding world, is a bad thing. And it occurred to me that magic does two things, or usually does two things, or fantasy really does two things. One, it expands possibility. There are things you can do in fantastical worlds that you can't really do in life, or at least not as often. And number two, the fantasy worlds typically have either A, so I guess I'm doing 2.A and 2.B, but 2.A, either A, a very simplified kind of, categorization. In a sense, you know who you are, unless you're Snape, in which case you have no idea who he is until the second to last book. Or actually the last book. And then 2.B. A lot of amazing things tend to happen really quickly and really close to each other. And it is absolutely dark from your perspective. But from my perspective, it's quite not as dark. So, that was an interesting metaphor. But on the interesting things continuously happening, I've realized, at least in my life, that quite a huge chunk of it is kind of spent waiting between interesting things. Sometimes I just sleep through that time period, or I just do something else that distracts me until I'm ready to engage with a new interesting thing. But a lot of my life is just waiting. And that struck me as a kind of a sad way to live life. But I guess no one really lives life for the boring parts. Unless you're just that kind of person who's content, in which case I applaud you. But even then, you're usually content because you live between pretty happy parts. And you're pretty assured of yourself that those happy parts will come. So Robert Frost said that everything he learned in life can be summarized in 3 words. It goes on. But that still seems to me not a very fulfilling way to live life. And I'm kind of curious how I can live in such a way that I live for the boring parts, as well as for the interesting parts. Thank you, though.